Part 3. Natalie did not leave Evelyn's kitchen immediately. She was not the kind of woman who retreated the first time a room stopped obeying her. Instead, she stood in the doorway with one hand resting lightly on the frame, her white cardigan perfect, her face composed, her eyes moving from me to Evelyn to Michael and back again. She was recalculating. I could almost see it happening. A few minutes earlier, I had been a weak woman in a hospital bracelet. Now I was a weak woman in a hospital bracelet with a witness, discharge papers, photographs, and a lawyer's name on the table. That changed the shape of the room. Natalie looked at Michael first. "We should go," she said. "Not we should take Helen home. Not we should fix this. Just we should go." Michael stayed seated. It was such a small rebellion that I almost missed it. Natalie did not. Her smile tightened. "Michael." He looked at me, then at the medication box he had brought over, then at the discharge papers on Evelyn's table. "Mom needs to rest," he said quietly. "Yes," Natalie replied. "At the recovery apartment." "No," I said. One word. I had said no to salespeople, to church committees, to extra dessert, to telemarketers who called during dinner. But saying no to my family felt different. Heavier. As if I were moving a piece of furniture that had been bolted to the floor for years. Natalie's eyes settled on me. "Helen, you are making this much harder than it needs to be." I wrapped my fingers around the warm mug. "No, Natalie, you made it hard when you changed my lock." Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She turned to Evelyn. "I'm sure you think you're helping, but this is private." Evelyn leaned against the counter and folded her arms. People usually say private when they're ashamed to have witnesses. Michael stared at the table. Natalie's face flashed with irritation, but only for a second. Then the softness came back. "Michael, come on. Your mother is tired. We'll let her calm down." Calm down. That phrase told me she had already begun writing the next version of the story. Helen was upset. Helen was emotional after anesthesia. Helen needed to calm down. It would sound reasonable to people who had not seen my suitcases. It would sound like concern to people who had not heard the new lock turn against my own key. I lifted my phone and took a picture of the discharge papers on the table. Natalie's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "Documenting." The word tasted strange in my mouth. Cold, but useful. She looked at Michael again. This time he stood. My heart sank before he even moved. He did not stand beside me. He stood beside her. "I'll call you later, Mom," he said. I looked at him. "Will you?" His face tightened. Yes. He sounded wounded, as if my doubt were the injury in the room. Natalie stepped outside first. Michael followed. Evelyn did not move until they were both off her porch. Through the window, we watched them walk back across the lawn. Natalie spoke quickly, her hand moving with sharp little gestures. Michael kept his head down. When they reached my porch, he picked up one suitcase and carried it back inside. For a moment, hope rose in me. Then Natalie pointed toward the driveway. Michael stopped, set the suitcase down, and said something I could not hear. They argued. Not loudly, but visibly. After a minute, he carried the suitcase inside anyway. Natalie stood on the porch, her arms crossed. Evelyn made a satisfied noise. "Well, that's one bag off the porch. One bag doesn't put me back in my house." "No," she said, "but it means he knows how wrong it looks." That was true. Sometimes the first crack in a lie is not a confession. It is the liar trying to hide the evidence. I sat back in the chair and suddenly felt every hour of the hospital in my bones. The adrenaline that had carried me through the first shock began to drain away. My hands grew cold. My chest felt heavy, not with the old pressure that had sent me to the hospital, but with exhaustion. Evelyn saw it immediately. "You need to lie down. I can't stay here. You can stay in my guest room. I don't want to impose." She gave me a look so sharp it could have sliced bread. "Helen Parker, your daughter-in-law put your bags outside while you were wearing a hospital bracelet. You are not imposing by lying down in my guest room." I did not have the strength to argue. The guest room smelled faintly of lavender sachets and clean sheets. Evelyn helped me settle into bed, placed my medication box on the nightstand, and set my phone within reach. "You rest," she said. "I'll keep an eye on the circus." I almost smiled. After she left, I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling. For the first time since leaving the hospital, I was still enough for memory to catch up. Not just the memory of the bags, older memories, smaller ones, the kind that had seemed harmless at the time. 3 months earlier, Natalie had come over with a measuring tape in her purse. I had been watering the fern in the living room when she stood near the fireplace, looking at the wall where George had hung our wedding portrait. "What are you measuring?" I asked. "Oh," she said lightly, "just thinking." "About what?" "Nothing serious. This room has such good light." I laughed then. "For what?" She smiled without answering. Later that day, I noticed she had taken photos of the built-in bookshelves. George's bookshelves. When I asked Michael about it, he shrugged. "Natalie loves design, Mom. Don't take everything as a threat." A month after that, she began talking about the stairs. Not once. Often. At Sunday lunch, she said, "Those stairs are steep." At Christmas, she said, "Helen, do you ever worry about falling?" When I carried laundry upstairs, she said, "That makes me nervous." Each time, Michael looked concerned. Each time, I reassured him. Each time, Natalie's face held the same quiet satisfaction, as if every denial I gave was still useful to her. She was not trying to convince me. She was training Michael. Then there was the day she asked about the deed. We were in my kitchen. She had brought over a casserole I never requested and was wiping the counter with a paper towel as if my house needed correcting. "Did everything transfer cleanly after George passed?" she asked. I was rinsing a plate. "What do you mean?" "The house. The paperwork. You know how messy estates can be. George handled all of that." "Of course," she said. I just wondered whether Michael would have to sign anything eventually. I turned off the water. "Why would Michael sign anything?" She gave that soft laugh. "Oh, I don't mean now. I just mean someday. These things are easier when they're planned." At the time, I told myself she was being practical. Now, lying in Evelyn's guest room while my bag sat on the porch across the lawn, I understood that Natalie had been walking around my life for months, checking the doors, windows, and weak spots. The hospital did not create her plan. It gave her timing. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Mom, Natalie says you're refusing to cooperate. Please don't let Evelyn turn this into a legal fight. We only wanted you safe." I read it 3 times. Not because it was complicated. Because it was familiar, Natalie says. Those 2 words had become the hinge on which my son's judgment swung. Natalie says you're tired. Natalie says the house is too much. Natalie says we should handle it. Natalie says you're refusing to cooperate. I typed slowly. I am not refusing safety. I am refusing removal. I pressed send. For several minutes, there was no answer. Then came another message. "The apartment is already paid for 2 weeks. Please just try it." I sat up too quickly and felt pain pull across my chest. Already paid. I read those words again. Already paid. That meant they had arranged it before I was discharged, maybe before the procedure. Maybe while I was still lying in a hospital bed answering Natalie's questions about keys and codes. I took a screenshot. Then I called Arthur Coleman again. His assistant put me through immediately. "Helen? They paid for an apartment already," I said. "Michael just texted me. Send me the screenshot." My fingers trembled as I forwarded it. Arthur was quiet for a moment after receiving it. "This helps establish pre-planning. Pre-planning. A clean legal word for betrayal." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means this was not a spur-of-the-moment safety decision after discharge. They made arrangements while you were hospitalized." I looked toward the window, though from the bed I could only see a strip of afternoon sky. "Arthur, can they force me there?" "No." "If Michael says it's for my safety?" "No." "If Natalie says I'm confused?" "Then she will need more than her opinion." I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Arthur continued, "Helen, I want you to avoid speaking with Natalie directly. Communicate by text if necessary. Preserve everything. And if they attempt to prevent you from entering your home, we will handle it formally." "Formally?" "Yes. Letter first. Then, if needed, law enforcement assistance for unlawful exclusion." The words frightened me. Law enforcement. Unlawful exclusion. My son. my home. These words did not belong together, and yet there they were. After hanging up, I lay back down and closed my eyes. For a few minutes, I drifted. Not sleep exactly. More like falling through memories. George, standing in the front yard with dirt on his hands, patting soil around the dogwood sapling. Michael, at 6 years old, running through the sprinkler. Natalie in my living room with a measuring tape. Michael carrying one suitcase back inside. George's voice the night we signed the mortgage papers. One day, this place will be paid off, Maggie. No one will be able to move us unless we want to go. He had kept that promise. Even after death, he had kept it. Now I had to keep my part. When I woke, the room was dimmer. Evelyn stood in the doorway, holding a tray with soup and crackers. "You were talking in your sleep," she said. "What did I say?" "Something about the dogwood tree." I smiled faintly. "George planted it. I know. He nearly threw his back out doing it." That memory made both of us quiet. Evelyn set the tray down. I checked my camera. I looked at her. "The one facing the street? And part of your porch." My heart began to beat faster. "What did it show?" She pulled her phone from her pocket and opened a video. The image was small, but clear enough. My front porch. Natalie carrying my blue suitcase out the door. Michael behind her with the brown one. A man I did not recognize changing the lock. The timestamp was Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday. I had been in the hospital Tuesday afternoon. Still connected to monitors. Still waiting for the doctor to tell me whether the procedure had worked. Natalie had been changing my lock while I was still being checked for bleeding at the incision site. My hand went to my mouth. Evelyn stopped the video. "I'm sending this to Arthur." I could only nod. The soup on the tray steamed gently between us. I thought of Natalie's voice in the hospital. "Don't worry about the house. We're handling everything." Yes, she had handled everything. My keys, my code, my belongings, my son, my story. Almost, but not quite. Because now there was a video. There was a timestamp. There was a text about the apartment already being paid for. There was a neighbor who had seen me arrive home in a hospital bracelet to find my life waiting outside in bags. And there was me, still tired, still in pain, still old, but no longer uncertain. I looked at Evelyn. "Can you help me write something down?" She handed me the notepad. "What do you want to write?" I thought for a moment. Then I wrote, "I did not consent to being moved. I did not consent to my locks being changed. I did not consent to my belongings being removed." The sentences looked plain. Almost too plain for the amount of pain behind them. But pain was not the point anymore. Consent was. And for the first time since I had seen those suitcases on the porch, I understood the center of what Natalie had done. She had mistaken my silence for permission. She would not make that mistake again. Part 4. That night, I slept in Evelyn's guest room. Not well. Not deeply. More like my body kept shutting down in short intervals because it had no choice, while my mind stayed awake beside it, watching the ceiling, replaying the same images over and over. The suitcases, the new lock, Natalie's white cardigan, Michael's lowered eyes, the video of my belongings being carried out while I lay in a hospital bed with wires on my chest. At some point after midnight, rain began tapping softly against Evelyn's window. The sound should have comforted me. Rain had always made my own house feel safer, as if the world outside had been softened and held at a distance. But I was not in my own house. That one fact kept returning with every breath. I turned carefully onto my side, trying not to pull at the tender place near my chest, and looked at the chair beside the bed. Evelyn had placed my purse there, along with my discharge folder, medication box, and the notepad where I had written the words Arthur told me mattered. I did not consent. 3 simple words. They looked small on paper, but they were the first wall I had built for myself in years. At dawn, I gave up on sleep and sat at the edge of the bed. My slippers were beside me, though I did not remember Evelyn placing them there. That was the kind of care that did not announce itself. It simply made the next step easier. I thought of George then, not because of the slippers, because George had been that way too. He was never a man of dramatic speeches. He did not bring home roses unless it was our anniversary, and even then he usually forgot the card. He did not write poetry. He did not know how to say complicated feelings in polished words. But he always made sure the car had gas before I drove it. He sharpened my kitchen knives every spring. He kept a flashlight in every room because he knew storms made me nervous after the power outage of 1996. And when we bought the house, he walked through every room with a notebook, writing down what needed fixing as if the house were a person we had agreed to raise together. The first year nearly broke us. The roof leaked over the hallway. The water heater died in February. The kitchen sink backed up the night before Michael's 4th birthday party, and I cried so hard George had to turn off the water and hold me with one arm while trying not to laugh. "We bought a disaster," I said into his shirt. "No," he told me. "We bought a future with bad plumbing. That was George. He could make a problem sound temporary. We fixed the house room by room. Not quickly. Never quickly. The living room came first because I wanted one place that felt finished. George spent 3 weekends building shelves along the far wall, measuring twice, cutting once, then measuring again because he did not fully trust himself. When he was done, I filled the shelves with books from library sales, gifts from friends, and the old hardcovers my father left me. George stood back with sawdust in his hair and said, "Now it looks like you." I asked what that meant. He shrugged. Stubborn and full of stories. I pretended to be offended. I was not. That room became the heart of our home. Michael learned to read on the old blue sofa beneath those shelves. George fell asleep there during baseball games. After he retired, he would sit in his brown armchair with a mug of coffee, pretending to read while really watching the birds outside. When George got sick near the end, he refused to stay upstairs during the day. He wanted to be in the living room, near the bookshelves, where he could hear the neighborhood, the mail truck, the children walking home from school. "This house has good bones," he said once, when the pain was bad and he was trying not to show it. "So do you," I told him. He smiled. "Mine are negotiable." I still remember the last serious conversation we had about the house. It was 2 weeks before he died. He had been sitting in that brown armchair, wrapped in the plaid blanket Michael gave him for Christmas. The dogwood trees outside were blooming, pink and white against the front window. His hands were thin by then, the veins sharp beneath the skin, but his eyes were clear. "Helen," he said, "I was folding laundry on the sofa." "Don't start a sentence like that," I told him. He smiled faintly. "Like what?" "Like you're about to leave instructions." "I am about to leave instructions." I stopped folding. He looked toward the bookshelves, then the hallway, then the window where the dogwoods moved in the wind. "This house is yours," he said. "George." "No, listen to me." So I did. There may come a time when people think they know better than you. They'll say the stairs are too much, the yard is too much, the maintenance is too much. Maybe they'll be right about some of it. Maybe someday you'll decide to leave. But it has to be your decision. I sat beside him then. His hand was warm when I took it. He continued, slower now. "I put everything in order with Arthur. The house transfers fully to you. No confusion. No shared ownership. No one can push you because their name won't be on it." At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Michael was our son. Natalie was polite. The future still looked painful, but not dangerous. George squeezed my hand. "Promise me something. Anything. Don't let anyone make you feel like a guest in the house we built." I promised. I meant it. But promises made in grief are different from promises tested in weakness. For 6 years, I thought keeping the house clean, paying the bills, and replacing furnace filters was how I kept that promise. I did not understand that one day, keeping the promise would mean fighting my own son at the edge of my neighbor's kitchen table. Evelyn knocked lightly around 7. "You awake?" "Yes." She opened the door carrying coffee. Of course she did. Evelyn believed coffee was medicine, comfort, and social obligation all in one cup. "How do you feel?" "Like I had heart surgery and got evicted on the same day." She handed me the mug. "That sounds accurate." I took a sip and almost smiled. "Arthur called while you were resting," she said. "He wants you to stay here until he comes by at noon." "Here?" "Yes. He doesn't want you going back over there alone. It's my house, and currently occupied by 2 fools with access to your belongings." That was Evelyn. Direct enough to hurt, but never careless. I looked toward the window. From the guest room, I could see only part of my front yard. One dogwood tree, a strip of porch, the corner of my living room window. My blue curtains were gone. Even from here, I could see the white ones Natalie had put up. The sight of them made my throat tighten. "I keep thinking about the curtains," I said. Evelyn sat on the edge of the chair. "The curtains? George helped me hang the blue ones. He hated ladders by then, but he insisted. Said no wife of his was going to live with crooked curtain rods." I gave a small laugh. It faded quickly. She changed them while I was in the hospital. Evelyn's face hardened. "That woman has no shame." "It's strange," I said. "The lock should bother me most. Or the bags. But the curtains, they touched memory." I looked at her. She shrugged. "People think old women are attached to objects because we're sentimental. Sometimes we're attached because the objects are witnesses." I stared at the coffee in my hands. Evelyn was right. The blue curtains had witnessed George standing on a ladder with a pencil behind his ear. The hallway wall had witnessed Michael's height marks. The porch swing had witnessed our last spring together. The bookshelves had witnessed 40 years of ordinary evenings. Natalie saw old things. I saw testimony. At 8:30, my phone buzzed. Michael. I let it ring. Not because I did not love him, because love had become too easy for him to use against me. A text followed. "Mom, Natalie thinks we should all meet calmly. She says bringing Arthur into this makes it feel hostile. Natalie thinks." Again. I typed one sentence. "Arthur is coming at noon. I will speak then." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, "Please don't do anything that hurts the family." I looked at the message for a long time. Then I typed, "The family put my bags outside. I am responding to that." I pressed send before I could soften it. For the first time in my life, I did not protect Michael from the full shape of a sentence. Evelyn read the exchange over my shoulder and made an approving sound. "Good. It feels cruel." "No, it feels unfamiliar." That stayed with me. So many things I had been taught to think of as cruel were only unfamiliar. Saying no, asking for proof, calling a lawyer, refusing to make other people comfortable while they harmed me. Around 10, Evelyn helped me walk slowly around her living room because the discharge nurse had said I should move a little each day. My legs trembled, and I hated that Natalie would have used that trembling as evidence. See? Too weak, too frail, too old. But Evelyn only held my elbow and said, "That's it. Slow is still moving." From her living room window, I could see Michael on my porch. He was alone. He stood by the suitcases, hands in his pockets, looking down at them. For a moment, the anger in me loosened. He looked lost. Then the front door opened and Natalie stepped out. She spoke to him sharply. He turned toward her. She gestured toward the street, then toward Evelyn's house. I could not hear them, but I saw enough. Michael picked up the remaining bags and carried them inside. One by one. Natalie watched. That should have made me feel better. It did not, because he was still carrying them on her schedule, under her eye, not because he had walked across the lawn, taken my hand, and said, "Come home." When the last bag disappeared through my front door, Natalie looked toward Evelyn's window. Our eyes met across the yard. Even from that distance, I saw the smile. Small. Tight. A warning. She wanted me to understand that moving the bags back did not mean surrender. I understood. So did Evelyn. "She's not done," Evelyn said. "No," I replied. "But neither am I." At noon, Arthur Coleman arrived. He drove an old black Lincoln that looked as if it had been polished every Saturday since 1994. He stepped out wearing a dark suit, carrying a leather folder, moving slowly but with authority. Some men shrink as they age. Arthur had only become more precise. Evelyn let him in through the side door. When he saw me sitting at her kitchen table with my hospital bracelet still on, his face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. "Helen," he said, "I am sorry." That was the first apology I had received since coming home. Not from my son. Not from my daughter-in-law. From my lawyer. I held myself together with both hands around my mug. Arthur sat across from me and opened his folder. I pulled the deed. "The house is solely in your name." There are no co-owners, no transfer rights, no authority granted to Michael or Natalie regarding occupancy, sale, lease, or alteration. Hearing it out loud did something to me. It did not erase the pain, but it restored the floor. Arthur continued, I also reviewed your power of attorney. Michael is listed, but only if you are incapacitated or unable to act. Based on your discharge papers, that condition has not been met. I looked at the hospital bracelet, so he had no right, no legal right. The legal part mattered, but not as much as the moral one. Arthur looked toward the window and saw my house across the yard. Have they allowed you back inside? No. Have you asked? I hesitated. No. Arthur's eyes returned to mine. Do you want to go home? The question was so simple I nearly cried. No one else had asked me that. Natalie had decided where I should recover. Michael had asked me not to make things harder. Evelyn had offered safety. Arthur asked what I wanted. I looked across the lawn at the house George built with me, the porch he repaired, the dogwoods he planted, the windows Natalie had changed. Yes, I said. My voice shook, but the word did not. I want to go home. Arthur closed the folder. Then we will start there. For 1 second, fear rose in me. What if Natalie refused? What if Michael begged? What if my body betrayed me and I started crying before I reached the porch? Then I remembered George's voice. Don't let anyone make you feel like a guest in the house we built. I stood slowly. Evelyn took my left arm. Arthur took the folder. Together, we walked toward the door. Not fast, not dramatically, but with purpose. Across the lawn, Natalie's white curtains hung in my living room window like a challenge. I looked at them and thought of the blue ones folded